I'm joined now by Hope McMath. She served as director of the Cummer Museum and Gardens for 22 years, is the founder of Yellow House Gallery, and is a highly visible activist on issues of racial justice. Hope, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Anne.
So, Hope, Yellow House has been around now for more than 6, almost 7 years. For people who haven't been or aren't familiar, what is the story of Yellow House?
So Yellow House is a space in North Riverside that was created to be a place where art and social justice and activism would intersect. And so we do that through exhibitions with local artists, specifically centering Black and Brown artists and queer and youth artists. But we also do it by convening people to have conversations around issues that matter, and actually activate people to be engaged civically in creating progress in our city.
So you've created this space as a platform for art and discussion and social justice. This is your first exhibit at Yellow House, though, as an artist.
That's correct. So, I've been an artist since I was a child. There's a few points in my life where I sort of stepped away from it for a bit. But Yellow House was really created, I am just the holder of that space for community. So yes, this is the first time that the walls are actually holding my own art, for better or worse.
So this first exhibition of yours, it's called Legacy Interrupted. What is the legacy that's being interrupted? Tell us about the inspiration for this exhibit.
So there's a few, but the one that is central to the exhibition is a part of my own personal story. It's recognizing over the last couple years in doing research into my own family that there is a long legacy of enslavement, of Confederate activity, of ancestors who were engaged in writing Jim Crow laws in the South, and just some folks up to a whole lot of no good. And I know a lot of people, especially those of us who are from the South, have that in their histories. It's not something that I was aware of, but was actually inspired to dig into, really because I was witnessing so many other people that I really care about sharing their stories on a regular basis. And I realized I hadn't done my own work. And so it's that legacy of oppression and white supremacy and the separation of people that I wanted to better understand, so that I could figure out the work that I needed to do.
So this is a story that you actually shared in the storytelling series Untold Stories that's at Florida Theater 4 times a year. I want to hear a little bit of that, and then I'd like to talk to you about it.
In addition to naming his wife and his sons and his daughters and the tools that he owned and the livestock that he had, there was also a list of 9 people who he had enslaved. It made me sick. And yet I wasn't shocked. In fact, there had to have been a part of me that knew that was going to be there, which is why I had not looked. And that 9 people in that first census record I found has now turned into 423.
Why did you want to share that story in that forum, and why have you wanted to share it more publicly?
It's a good question. I mean, when I first started down this journey, it was something just very, very personal and something I was sort of doing on my own. I think it's from being around a lot of really remarkable activists and educators that I have just come to understand and believe that justice only comes when we learn in public. When we are willing to sort of lift up the messiness of our lives, both individual lives and collective lives, that we can sort of recreate this world. And I was reluctant to do that story, but my good friend Barbara Colacello, who runs that series, is both convincing and brilliant in helping people sort of get to that place. I have spent decades doing a lot of public speaking, and I've never been more petrified than getting ready to do that storytelling on the Florida Theater stage. And I realized it's because for the first time it was my own story that I was sharing.
Was the research that you did scary? Was that a frightening undertaking or an intimidating undertaking, given your commitment, your passion for social justice issues?
You know, I think subconsciously, as we sort of have heard, I knew, I think my gut knew some of that was there, which is why I had never looked at it. I mean, I'm a 53-year-old person. Why it took me almost 50 years to even ask these questions is a little surprising, considering that at least for the last decade of my life, I have been focused around trying to play some positive role in racial justice work. So the research I wouldn't say it was frightening. It was, I found it sad how quickly I actually was able to find out a lot of this information. I did have a moment where I thought, oh my gosh, this is a little awkward, right? Here I am, this person out here proclaiming, that, I care about, anti-racist action. And yet I have a history full of oppressors. And then I thought, well, but it's really when we stare at the wretchedness of that truth that I think we can authentically be in conversation with community around how we can each be disruptors in those sort of cycles of trauma and cycles of pain.
And I recall when you went to that new exhibit, which is the kind of lynching memorial that documents from each and every state, victims of racial violence. That was a piece of history that is, also a difficult, very difficult history that is a reckoning. And I wonder if that visit in particular influenced you to start looking into your own history.
It absolutely did. So these trips that 90 Forward, one of our great organizations in the city that I'm proud to be a volunteer with, they do these trips out to Montgomery to the Equal Justice Initiative sites and specifically to the lynching memorial. And it was on that trip, literally, that I recognized my own lacking when it came to dredging up, sort of vomiting up some of what I felt was probably in my own past. And there is something transformative about being in a place like Montgomery and seeing these sites where there's such courage in the truth telling. They're seductively beautiful, which is also leads to these complex kind of visceral feelings when you're in those spaces. But to gaze upon the names of men and women who have been lynched in this country is just so important. We think about the more contemporary movement to say their names when we see, Black bodies, killed by police violence and otherwise. And, the idea of saying their names and sort of witnessing these losses and committing to doing something about it is, it's not just in the past, it's also today.
Can you just give us a description of what people will see when they come to see this exhibit?
So I'm a printmaker, which means I do woodcuts and silkscreen and letterpress. And so people will see 30 or so large-scale works that focus around 3 portraits. One, which is of Hakalia McMath, my ancestor, who was a Confederate and an enslaver. You will also see a lot of imagery of the Women of the Southland Monument in Springfield Park. She is very central in the story of this exhibition. And then you will see portraits of Harriet Tubman. Not that I have any personal connection to Harriet Tubman, but the 423 people that my family enslaved, I don't have their images. We don't have their names because history tends to erase those folks. And so Harriet sort of stands as a symbol of both resilience and resistance, and sort of as a stand-in for those folks that I felt they needed to be in that space as well. And so it's a combination of words and portraits and documents and these really multi-layered images that are complex and messy and where things get erased and things get revealed. And for me, that is very much parallel to the process of this discovery of my own family's history. I could have never worked as large scale as I did. It's unusual for me to work this large, but I was able to do a residency at FSCJ in the fall. And they have amazing facilities, and Patrick Mico, who's a professor there, sort of stood beside me as I was doing this work. And so most of the pieces in the show are a result of that residency.
Well, Hope McMath, thank you so much for coming and sharing your story with all of us along with your artwork at Yellow House. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.